It's time for Security Now. Steve Gibson is here. We're going to talk about the top 100 retailers and their password policies. You'd be amazed at some of the easygoing password policies, low security password policies some of these online stores have. We also have all the security news for you. Steve Gibson's next on Security Now.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit. Bandwidth for Security Now is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com. This is Security Now with Steve Gibson, episode 441, recorded February 4th, 2014. Password policies. Security Now is brought to you by Proxpn. Proxpn is a virtual private network that allows you to use the internet the way it should be, without oversight. For 20% off your new account, go to proxpn.com/twit and use the code SN20. It's time for Security Now, the show that protects you, your loved ones, your privacy, all the stuff you need to stay safe online with this guy, the explainer-in-chief. Not cheap.
Yeah, I'm the explainer-in-chief.
Cheap. He's a cheap explainer. Well, it's a free show. I guess he is the explainer-in-chief. We could charge for this stuff, you know. Mr. Stephen Tiberius Gibson. He is, of course, the man in charge at grc.com, the Gibson Research Corporation. Has written many really useful tools. You've probably heard of a great many of them, including Shields Up. And his bread and butter is SpinRite, the world's finest hard drive maintenance utility. And it's time for a show, no questions, just answers show.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. What came to my attention last week, and I mentioned it at the end of, I think, the podcast last week, was a study that was done by a company, Dashlane, who make a password management utility. Everyone, of course, is familiar with those. Everyone knows my favorite is LastPass. I want to make sure we give Dashlane credit for this research and let people know that they're there, because we're taking advantage of their research. And I don't want to, I want to, give them their due. So what they did was they performed a set of tests to essentially reverse engineer from interacting just with the web interface of the industry's current top 100 web retailers, which they obtained from some other list. I mean, it's the who's who of the internet. I mean, Amazon's there, Apple's there, Microsoft. We'll be talking about these names toward the end of the podcast, because they reverse engineered the login policies of this top 100 set of retailers and found some really interesting things. Like I was saying to you before you hit the record button, there are some really curious things. Like they looked at the minimum password acceptable, and there are some sites whose minimum password is 1.
What?
First of all,
that's password, right?
That's understandable, because less than that would be none.
Right.
And so basically they're saying, did you leave the password field blank or not?
Right.
But there are also some that have a minimum length of 3. And it's like, wait. So someone wrote code to see whether you had a password of 1 or 2 characters, and that was not okay, but 3 was? Anyway, some really interesting things come out of this. This is a problem because there's a spreadsheet that's online, which I now understand that's a Google spreadsheet. You just explained to me, Leo, that you can't have an infinite number of people looking at it. But I created a bit.ly shortcut, bit.ly/ and then SN441, which is the number of the podcast, sheet, SHEET. So our listeners who will be listening at various times of day will probably be able to bring this up, because I doubt that there'll be more than 100 any one time. But this is the raw data from Dashlane's study, which we'll be looking at later on in the podcast, and I've got all kinds of summaries and things that I've already established from that, which is really just fascinating, because, it's, for example, is there a limit to the number of times you can attempt to log in, and what is that limit, and so forth. So neat analysis that we're going to go into on today's password policies. I initially put in 2014, but that would make the title too long. So I thought, okay, well, we'll just leave it as password policies. And some interesting news. So this week on Security Now, we've got a new version of Firefox we'll be looking at, an emergency update to Flash from Adobe just happened today, and it's important for Windows PCs, Macs, and even Linux.
Wow.
Because this was a 0-day flaw which allows code to be executed in your machine if you let Flash run.
Oh.
So bad news.
God.
Also, something picked up on the return of Honeywords. We talked about honey passwords, shortened to Honeywords, I think last summer when this happened. But for some reason, they sort of came back. So I thought I would just mention them briefly. We're seeing a troubling rise in malicious ads. I found a very interesting Windows firewall add-on that I want to talk about. And my own research brought me to why tossing a coin is not fair, which we'll talk about.
Really?
And did the NSA ask me to build a backdoor into CryptoLink? Someone did a blog posting positing that maybe that had happened, and much more this week.
Wow.
So lots of fun stuff.
Boy, I would expect you would mention it if it had, but
so, well, actually, I said that I would simply stop talking about it. And I did stop talking about it, about CryptoLink. So,
whoa. All right, well, shh. Whoa. Never say anything. NSA.
Today. What?
Go ahead.
I was going to say today, we got a new version of Firefox, version 27. And one of the things that they commented on was that TLS version 1.2 has been implemented. Now, other people, in response to last week's comments about the howsmyssl.com site, HOWSMYSSL.com, they commented that, well, in 26, you could turn it on, but it wasn't on by default. So when I updated to 27, which just happened, hours ago, and I went to How's My SSL, it was a little happier. Last week, I got bad because it had two problems with my version 26. Well, then I got improvable, I think it was, and it was still complaining that I was using TLS version 1.1. So I thought, what? So anyway, what happened was, and to our listeners who may also be affected by this, I went into the way you go into Firefox's config is about:config. You stick it up in the URL address bar. That takes you to this overwhelming number of things you can tweak. And then in the search area, you put in TLS, and that brings it down to a manageable 8 or so things that involve TLS. Well, sure enough, it turns out that sometime in the past, I had overridden Firefox's then conservative max level, pushing it forward, but now it was pushed back because Firefox had been marching forward and my override was now behind the times. It used to be setting the TLS max version higher than it was the default, but it was sticky, so now it was setting it lower than the default. So if you right click, and you can see that any overrides will be in bold in the Firefox about:config screen after you've whittled it down. So I just right-clicked and hit reset, and it removed the highlighting, allowing version 27, which is today's, to now run at TLS version 1.2 where it wants to. And sure enough, How's My SSL now says probably okay, because remember, it's pretty stingy about, it doesn't get very excited about even when everything is perfect. It's like, it's probably okay. So that's, the the best you can get. However, they did, with version 27 from last week, remove that one pesky triple DES SSL cipher. Remember, I made you laugh, Leo, because the comment was, this cipher was meant to die with SSL 3.0 and is of unknown safety. It's like, oh, okay, fine. So anyway, that's gone now. So Firefox has brought themselves up to the probably okay status with How's My SSL, which is the best anybody can get. And nothing much else got fixed. They are continuing to move forward towards improving standards, support, and interoperability. So I dove into the, like, what do the developers think? What do the webmasters think? And there was like all kinds of fixes down in the details of like, this got added and this is now being supported and this we removed and blah, blah, blah. But, no huge security changes or anything, just moving us forward. And also taking TLS 1.2, making that now the default rather than, as was the case before today, you had to like push it. It was there, but you had to turn it on purpose. Now they said, okay, fine, it seems to be working. We'll let everybody use it. So, this is good news that we're now at 1.2 across the board with our major browsers. It's been a while coming. The standard's been available for quite a while. But now that we're seeing servers supporting it and browsers are supporting it, some of those pesky edge cases where, there were theoretical attacks that worried people, those are pretty much falling by the wayside, and that's good. So unless you're using the latest version of IE, that is IE 11, or Chrome, both of which will be immediately made aware automatically that Adobe has a newer version of Flash, you really do need to update. If you're running any kind of Flash blocker, as of course everyone is who's using NoScript, then you're probably more okay. The reason this is a problem is that an integer underflow bug has been found. This was detected by the guys at Kaspersky, who found it being used in the wild. So they, in doing their research, their malware research, they found instances where people were going to a page that ran Flash, and they were getting malware installed just by visiting that page that had Flash-enabled content. I don't know whether this was ads or something from the page. Well, we actually one of the things I want to talk about here in a second is a troubling increase in the level of malware we're seeing in ads. And of course, ads are delivering Flash content to the annoyance of web surfers everywhere. But Adobe's got an update that they pushed out under like emergency terms to deal with what is this 0-day flaw. So it's important for people whose browsers are not updating themselves automatically to go get that. You really should either have, it's hard to work without Flash. It's still something that people are using and depending upon. There's a site that I like, nutritiondata.self.com, which is really a nice way to research the content of stuff that you eat. But all of their little charts require Flash. So I'm often wanting to do it on my, on an iOS device, which, famously doesn't support Flash. So I can see some of the stats, but not the little charts. So it's sort of annoying.
We were talking about the exploit. We were talking about it on MacBreak Weekly, and what was it, Alex or Aaron Hilligas? One of the guests said, they've been very successful in recoding everything in HTML5. Mm-hmm. No problems. They've solved all the latency issues. Flash should just die. There's no reason to use it anymore.
Yep.
And it locks you out of every iOS device. So, besides the security issue, you're going to lose in a big portion of the mobile audience. Just don't use it.
And, of course, the mobile audience is a growing portion of the audience.
Yeah. I presume that the site you're talking about is from Self Magazine, and you'd think they would care about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But they've already coded it, and they don't want to recode it and blah, blah,
yes.
blah.
Yeah, and in fact, it's interesting. I moved all of my site's videos, like the SpinRite demo and other stuff, over to HTML5 some time ago. But the PDP-8 videos that I did years back, I still haven't done. And I did the work to create a really nice set of files, because there's 3 different formats you want. There's MP4, WebM, and OGV. And I came up with some simple batch files that I use that run FFmpeg to like automatically take an existing video in any format you have and transcribe it into, transcode it. That was the word I was looking for. Transcode it into each of those 3 at an acceptably low bit rate and converts the audio and does all that stuff. And I thought, I really ought to share this with the world, because it took a while to come up with all of the, if you've ever seen a command line of FFmpeg, it's like, oh my goodness.
we do, because every show we do is encoded with FFmpeg. And Russell Tammany has written a bunch of scripts using very, very long FFmpeg command lines. Holy moly,
So Honey Passwords, I guess it was net-security.org made a posting about this, which Gizmodo picked up on. And when Gizmodo picks up on it, everybody starts tweeting me the link, because it's like, oh my God, and when I saw it coming in, I'm thinking, wait a minute, this isn't news. This was like last summer. And so I checked to make sure that it wasn't anything new. And sure enough, I mean, this was interesting research by 2 guys who we've talked about, Ari Jules from RSA Labs, and of course, Ron Rivest is the R of RSA, who's now at MIT. And this was Honeywords, or, sort of a honeypot passwords concept. The idea was that you would salt your web server's database with a bunch of fake user accounts with easily crackable like hashes of passwords, like password and 1 2 3 4 5 6. That is, you would pretend to be really okay, I almost said stupid, but I didn't.
Silly
users who would have those really poor passwords, but you would tie them into a sentinel on your server, and the idea was that it would sort of be like a canary in the coal mine, where if anyone tried to log in to these fake accounts using really easily crackable passwords, that would let you know that your database somehow had been exfiltrated from your control.
Clever.
Yeah, it is. And so this paper was published on May 2nd of 2013. Bruce Schneier blogged about it 4 days later, saying, here is a simple but clever idea. Seed password files with dummy entries that will trigger an alarm when used. That way a site can know when a hacker is trying to decrypt the password file. So, since today is all about passwords, I thought, okay, well, I'll acknowledge the fact that I did see all those tweets from people who picked up on Gizmodo's delayed announcement of something that we talked about some months ago.
It really does happen that for some reason lately a lot, blogs come back to stories they published months ago.
Yeah.
And people don't look, or the worst thing is I see tweets from stories of years ago, and people act as if, I just read this. You got to read the date. Read the date line. Yeah, always a good idea. And go to the original source. It's the other thing I do. Very important. Go to the originals. Follow the backtracks to the original source, and then you'll see, oh, yeah, this is ancient.
And I want the original source because I don't want the digested version. Yes. I want to go and get, there's typically much more interesting information there. Right. So the Wall Street Journal did a piece where they talked about the growing problem of malware in ads. And of course, Yahoo famously got infected about maybe a couple weeks ago. I don't think I covered it just because we've been running out of time on the podcast, and I had to just say, okay, wait, there's not enough time to talk about this. And there really wasn't much to say except that Yahoo had been serving an ad that had been infecting people for some time. And I found some stats that I thought were interesting and a little troubling. Risk IQ Inc. had been tracking malicious ads. In 2011, they found on the order of 70,000 of them. A year later. Oh, yeah. A year later, in 2012, 205,000 of them. And last year, 384,000 of them.
Now, what does that mean? Individual, I don't know, what's the count of?
That's a good question.
Online, I see it somewhere online thing.
Right, but they're unique instances of ads.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And Google in 2012 disabled ads from more than 123,000 sites, but a year later, across 2013, disabled ads from more than 400,000 sites.
Holy moly.
And so, and finally, the last stat here is that what's the problem here is that, and we talked about this, for example, with CryptoLocker, where the older versions were now being caught by pretty much all of the AV, but those samples that I posted, when I posted them 2 weeks ago, they were only being seen by 4 or 5 out of 47. Well, these recent malicious ads are being missed by 44 out of 47 AV programs over on VirusTotal.
Now, I don't want to encourage this, but if you used ad block, you wouldn't be vulnerable to them, right?
Correct. These things, I mean, first of all, the malicious ad probably needs execution privileges. That is, it needs scripting, or as we were just talking about Flash, it needs Flash. I say probably because we have seen just, static image vulnerabilities where, the
malformed
image,
JPEGs, for instance.
Correct. Yeah. Exactly. And that we have seen malformed JPEGs, a JPEG, a PNG, of whatever, that are being rendered in your machine. The bad guys cleverly find a rendering flaw that is where they're able to actually put code in the image, and it will, the image won't display typically, but it'll crash the renderer. But in the process, it runs code that they've also provided. Those are rare. What's more typical is that the code, is that the ad actually is containing scripting and will run JavaScript or, God help you, Java itself, and take over your machine, execute the attacker's code. So really, just you could still show ads if you just didn't let them run script. Right. And of course, no script will do that for you. It solves that problem.
I have no ethical issue with doing that, by the way.
Right. The other thing that's cool, we talked about how Google is starting to render the images for you, which is a huge win. So rather than your page showing ads that your browser has fetched directly from the source of the image, Google, because the if Google has provided the page, or if you're in Gmail, and that's typically where it's going to happen. You're looking at an HTML page with ads in it. Google will pull the image and render it essentially on its own server, then take a picture of it and sort of re-render it. And we've talked about the idea of transcoding the image. For example, Opera famously does that in order to reduce the size of overly large images for their mobile platform. When you're using Opera Mobile, you actually get a good speed improvement because your browser's not having to go out and grab overly large images. So that's also going to inherently clean up your your advertising images and prevent it from being a problem. But I guess this just sort of came across my radar, and I wanted to take a minute to say that it makes sense that this would be a new vector, because if bad guys are able to purchase ads and get them into major ad feed streams, and if those ads bypass the AV, even a web advertiser that is doing a good job of protecting their trying to protect their feed from malware, if ads are like staying ahead of AV detection, they'll go through. So it's uncommon that a static image is going to have a problem. So this is further reason not to let ads, execute code. And, you see them where they're like, amazing animations in these ads where, fishes are swimming around and their bubbles are blowing and, the seaweed is undulating. And, it's funny because I only see that when I look at other people's browsers. My browsers all have no script installed. And so I see ads, but I see their fallback image, which is, for one thing, way less distracting than these crazy, flash ads.
It's really, the other point to be made is that it is the ad networks that are really at fault here, because they allow people to put an ad up unchecked. Here's $100, take my ad, and they don't check the code, they don't check the ad, they don't make sure everything's okay. And they're the ones who are propagating these viruses. So I really don't understand why the ad networks aren't getting more heat from this, because it's them, the Googles, the Facebooks, and all the other ones they're supplying these ads that are making this possible.
Yeah, there was one piece I read following some links that talked about how in some cases when the companies behind the malicious, like discovered malicious ads, were they tried to backtrack, they not surprisingly, they were dead ends. They were like non-existent companies.
So it's be easy to check that.
Precisely. Do it before you post their ad on hundreds of thousands of people's web or web browsers.
Is that these ad networks really have completely automated ways of buying an ad. Go on Facebook, and you can buy an ad directly, have it start showing up in people's pages right now in seconds. And that shouldn't. They make it too easy. In other words.
Right. And so what they've done is they've essentially created a malware anonymizing service.
Yes.
Why
don't they get more heat for that?
And a malware distribution
malware distribution network here.
Yeah.
So you're going to legitimate sites. The site's safe, but the ad on the site isn't.
Precisely.
I think they really should get more heat for that. And frankly, it's going to kill their business, because what do people do? They run ad block.
Yeah.
And I can't really blame people for running ad block if they're worried that ads are going to put malware in their system.
Ad block must allow something through.
Oh, they do.
Because I was going to say,
you can make a deal with ad block to be a premium ad client. And ad block will not block.
Yeah.
So there's two different. There's ad block and ad block plus, and one is less good than the other, and I'm not sure which.
I have ABP on my Firefox, and I see ads. I just don't see see things skipping across my screen and really bothering me.
Yeah, ad block plus was kind of ABP was for a while. I thought the nonprofit kind of, but apparently, remember we saw that story that they were offering people.
And there is a checkbox at the bottom of the config screen. Let's see, configure.
It says, how do we make money? We are being paid by some larger properties that serve non-intrusive advertisements. They have the acceptable ads initiative.
Yeah, and see that again. I'm kind of okay with that, because
I think it's extortion.
So they're doing some curating so that
you know how they curate? Give me some money. I think it's extortion. They're saying, you want people to see your ads, you better give us some money here.
Yeah,
not extortion's not the right word.
But you also can't have, hey, I've got color TV, shouting out of your.
Well, they say
ad.
that.
Well, my point is, my experience
Yes,
is
they do that. Yeah.
yeah, that I see other people's browsers and I think, oh my goodness, how do you sit in front of that?
Oh, yeah, it's garbage.
And mine is just very sedate.
And that's the other I mean, so here's, I've mentioned my position before, but you're using a free site that is ad supported. By not looking at the ads, you're really cheating. You're saying, well, I'm not going to see the ads, but I still want the free service. So the ethical way would be not go to those sites that have really annoying ads, or see the ads, but to block them and go to the site is kind of, to me, it's clearly unethical. However, they're bringing this on themselves by having obtrusive ads, malware-based ads, and I can't really blame somebody for wanting to block that. Well,
and the perfect compromise is just make sure you've got scripting shut down, and because I don't want to say it can't happen, because we know it can. You can have a malicious static image, but it's you're 99.999% safe if you simply block scripting, because that's the way the malicious ads are being served. And if you block scripting, you'll still see their backup static content. You just won't see, it won't look like a circus on that's happening.
And it really, some of this stuff is terrible.
Oh, God. It's just awful. Okay, so I have the link here in the show notes, Leo, under Intelligence Law Blog. And this was, I guess, it says 2013/12, so it must have been December of last year, that it's a very well-written blog posting. And I won't read the whole thing. I'm just going to say that this blogger, who's a listener, he's a fan of the show, says, he asked the question, did the NSA or FBI threaten Steve Gibson to force him to abandon CryptoLink? And he runs through the timeline where he explains how excited I was, and I was talking about it all the time, and getting trademarks and buying domain names, and in fact I did buy CryptoLink.com. It's the only domain name I think I've ever purchased from someone. It was a chunk of change, actually, because I was like, I was going to make this a commercial product, and I wanted CryptoLink.com, and so I got that. And then he says, at one point, he says that I was speaking of CryptoLink often and enthusiastically, and once said, quote, if you ever hear of me or learn of me discontinuing CryptoLink for no reason, you'll know that for whatever reason, I felt no longer able to offer something whose security I could put my reputation behind, because I'll kill it before I would compromise it. And then he goes on to say, and then like on some last podcast,
March 4th, 2010, you spoke those fateful words.
Yep. And then never mentioned it again. And of course, it's interesting because I did just mention it a couple weeks ago, but of course, that's not fair to the pod. This blog post was more than a few weeks ago. It was 8 weeks ago or 6 or something, because I explained that, I guess at some point I remember saying that I did deliberately say, okay, I can't do this, because we talked about at the time I was reading the handwriting on the wall, even pre-Snowden, that our government seemed to be really uncomfortable with crypto technology on the internet that it didn't have a back door to. And my concern was that I would invest a year of my time developing CryptoLink to be commercial, and then have someone approach me and say, Steve, we need access to your customers' use of this tool, and there's no way I could allow that. I mean, in the same way that Ladar and others have said, no, this is not okay. And so I stopped working on it because I was concerned that was going to happen. And then, of course, we've had all of the NSA revelations of the past, year since Snowden and so forth. So my current plan that I referred to.
Just to be clear, you did that because preemptively. It wasn't that you were approached. You did it
Correct.
because you figured eventually you would be approached and you just didn't want to be in the position of doing a crypto solution.
Well, I didn't want to be in a position of having invested a year of my time in something that I then had to kill.
So, but just to be clear, the feds have not contacted you, did not contact you.
They have not. Absolutely have not, and never have. And
there's nothing to contact you over at this point.
And probably I couldn't say it if I wouldn't answer the question.
It depends on how they contact you. I mean, if they walked up to you as they did to that woman at the security conference.
The RSA
hey, would you mind if we put a back door in there on Mike? That's not. You could tell people that happened. If they send you a national security letter, then it's a different. And
so my current plan is to do CryptoLink as freeware in the future.
Okay.
So then I feel different about it. If I always intend to make it free, then it's, first of all, and for some reason I can't, then okay, well,
no harm, no foul. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the plan. And by the way, I keep meaning to get to this. Is there something called freeland.org? Can you put that in real quickly?
Let me check. Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's good. It's techie. It's not easy to use, but and it looks like they did everything right. Yes, there it is. Someone's tweeted it to me, and I think I've got it in notes somewhere so that I can give them credit. So this would be like a Hamachi replacement? Yes, this is a very much done right TNO Hamachi replacement. It's not for the faint of heart, but it will allow you, it is cross-platform, Windows, Mac, and Linux, and it will allow you to build Hamachi-style private networks in your own IP space. You wouldn't want to use 5 dot anymore, but and I think they use 9 dot, which is owned by IBM. There was another one that I thought would be a better choice. But anyway, I wanted to this is completely I'm not prepared to do a full presentation about it, but I have spent some time digging into it, and it's very nice looking. So freeland.org, and you can either do client server or a peer-to-peer network, or a hybrid, very much like Hamachi. And all of the crypto looks very neat, correctly done.
Freelan, FREELAN.org.
Yeah. So Windows users who are also a little more on the techie side, I ran across something called Windows Firewall Control, which is free. It's Bini, B-I-N-I, soft.org, binisoft.org. And they have 2 things that they offer. One of them is unregistratable, registrationable. Anyway, registerable, I guess. Yeah. And that's something that allows you to can't register it anyway.
Registerable. Registerable.
Register.
Ask Dr. Mom. She knows all that stuff.
You do not need to register even to get.
That's right.
Anyway, so
circumlocute. That's always the solution.
I hate adding stuff to my machine, but if it's there already and I can tweak it, I'm much happier. Well, we've had Windows Firewall famously since XP. Initially, it wasn't on by default. Then they turned it on in Service Pack 2, and they've continued to add features to it to make it more powerful ever since. Windows Firewall Control is a very nifty add-on. I think you need Windows 7. Doesn't support XP, but it runs from Windows 7 or Vista or 8 or 8.1 and also Server 2008 that gives you control. Just from their description, Windows Firewall Control is a nifty little application which extends the functionality of the Windows Firewall, which is, and this is my point, is already there in your machine, and provides quick access to the most frequent options of Windows Firewall. It runs in the system tray, and allows users to control the native firewall easily without having to waste time by navigating to the specific part of the firewall. Believe me, it's hard to get in there. You know, Microsoft doesn't make it easy to find. So, for example, they say Windows Firewall Control offers 4 filtering modes, which can be switched with just a single mouse click. High filtering. Suddenly, all outbound and inbound connections are blocked. This setting blocks all attempts to connect to and from your computer, which is kind of cool. Sometimes you might want to do that. Someone was asking the other day if they wanted to run, I don't remember what it was. I think it was the off-the-grid, my off-the-grid password generator based on Latin squares. They loved it, but they were trying to run it on a disconnected machine, and I ended up suggesting, well, you could do it in a VM. They just liked the idea of running the randomness without any access to GRC, because I think GRC helps. It provides some of the entropy seeding of the ultra high entropy random number generator that I developed for the off the grid thing. But here you could just switch on high filtering to essentially disconnect yourself from the internet for some period of time. Medium filtering says outbound connections that do not match a rule are blocked. Only the programs that you allow can initiate outbound connections. And that's cool. So this is bringing, back this notion of famously zone alarm style blocking, where you are able to control specifically which applications have access to the internet. Low filtering, outbound connections that do not match a rule are allowed. The user can block the programs he doesn't want to initiate outbound connections. Or no filtering. Windows Firewall is turned off. It says avoid using this setting unless you have another firewall running on your computer. And then they've just got a ton of really interesting features. I won't go through them all at length, but I'm impressed. So if this sounds interesting to you, there's just like all kinds of additional things they've added to it that really impressed me. And for a $10 donation, which you can make through PayPal, they add, you get, with registering this, a notification system where you can get notification, for example, of things that are trying to access the internet that you haven't been made aware of. And of course, famously, I was beta testing Zone Alarm, and that's how I discovered that I had the ad alert or the adware stuff, the Radiate and Oriate, as they were calling themselves at the time, spyware in my machine. So anyway, I'm impressed with this little app. I'm not running it yet because I'm on XP, but anyone who's 7 or later can. And again, it just runs with the existing firewall, which I like a lot better than, installing a third-party firewall that, into an existing system, since, there's a perfectly good one already present. And they do, by the way, for free, also make a USB flash drive controller, which enables you just to do a complete enable and disable of all USB flash drives on your machine. You can deny execution from the flash drive. So to protect yourself from anything running off of it, many people just use their flash drives for data, and they want to be protected from, for example, malware that might get into their system that way, and this could do that. Famously, probably Stuxnet would have never been able to operate had this been present. And you can also cause them to be mounted read-only, so your system can never write to flash drives, which could also come in handy. And that's a little freebie from the same people, which I think is neat.
Yeah.
Okay. What I think we're starting to see is another, it's been described as a land grab by malware furiously going after point-of-sale terminals. Famously, of course, we've been talking for the last few weeks about the target infiltration of malware into their Windows XP embedded POS terminals, and which ended up causing 110 million people's credit card data to be exfiltrated from Target over some period of time. Then Neiman Marcus has now confessed a similar breach. Just this morning, they were in front of a Senate hearing, and Reuters was tweeting live from the hearing. Apparently, their CIO said that a maximum of 1.1 million accounts were potentially exposed to malware in a data breach that they suffered, but probably somewhat less than that. And this occurred, they're saying, during transactions at 77 of 85 Neiman Marcus stores between July and October of last year, of 2013.
Boy, these point-of-sale systems really are a target, aren't they?
Yes, and that's
so
what
vulnerable.
Yes, I think that's what is going to happen. In fact, I jumped on TNT yesterday morning to talk about this briefly with Mike and company, because there was some additional news that had just surfaced. The RSA has uncovered a botnet, which they're calling Chewbacca. I don't know why. But it's a key logging and memory scraping botnet, which they have acquired the binary and reverse engineered the binary. They discovered that it uses Tor hidden servers, so there is a Tor client in the binary which goes through the Tor network to hide the server that it is contacting. And it's exfiltrating this, user's credit card and PIN and other transaction data from point of sale terminals, wherever this is installed. It puts itself in the startup folder. It, again, takes advantage of the fact that most of these systems are running Windows XP, the embedded version. And unfortunately, in 62 days, that'll no longer be
embedded
getting any
goes longer.
Updates.
I think embedded.
Oh, it does.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right. It does. Yes. But I wonder whether embedded XP running out in some little terminal is it getting updates?
How is it being updated? Yeah,
I'd be surprised actually if it were pulling security updates, because they probably figure, well, no one's able to browse anywhere, so why keep it current?
Lordy.
So I think what we're seeing is unfortunately, a new and very vulnerable attack vector. Think of all the little chains and stores.
And they all use the same software, right? I mean, that's part of the problem.
There's a low number of original sources of this, and they're all, they're all, leasing it or purchasing it, and it's probably got the same, and it's probably just old crap that's in there, because it's like, it works. Why update it?
Why change it?
Why indeed? Okay, so this is completely random, but that's actually a bad pun, because I'm now working, as I'll explain for different reason in a minute, on the user interface side of the Squirrel project. It's been coming along beautifully, and I'm now working on what the user sees as they use Squirrel. And I'm doing this just prior to starting to write code, because I'm at the point now where we're ready to write code. And I was spending some time on the problem of generating entropy, because one of the things that Squirrel needs, as everything does that's doing crypto, is really, 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 really good source of randomness. And it's easy to say that, but we've talked about, for example, the bizarreness of people's of the discovery that SSL certificates are using the same private key. because they're being generated by Unix systems or Linux systems, which are turned on and immediately asked to generate a key. Well, if you turn the same systems, the same version of Linux or Unix on, and immediately ask it to generate a key, it hasn't had a chance to get much randomness, because they're all starting from the absolutely same initial condition when they boot. And so it turns out that enough companies did that they generated the same random keys for their SSL certificates. No one knew until the EFF started looking at all of the random keys and found surprisingly collisions between them. So that's an example of where we think we have something random, but we actually don't. And in a system like Squirrel, we don't want to make that kind of mistake. So I was like brainstorming sources of randomness, and I already talked about some that I think are kind of clever, like having the user turn their camera on and just shake it and point it around, and while Squirrel is streaming the video in and just absorbing all of that absolutely high level of random noise that would go into a random pool in order to generate the user's single unique identity, which they can potentially then maintain for the rest of their lives and identify themselves uniquely on the internet. So as I was thinking about this, I just thought, well, what about a coin toss? What about just giving, again, I'm working on the user interface side. So one option would be, okay, get a coin. And we're going to set the counter to 0.
All right.
And you toss the coin. When it lands, you press heads or tails. Okay, that's one. Now you do it again. Mm-hmm. And if you did it 256 times, you would generate a 256-bit, absolutely incredibly high entropy random number.
Right.
Or would you?
A heads is 1, a tails is 0.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And 50-50 chance.
Yeah,
and
right.
so, wouldn't that be random?
Yeah.
So I thought, I better make sure that would be random before I suggest that to anybody.
It's not.
Turns out it's not.
What?
I found some interesting analysis. The guys, there's a group called StatWeb at Stanford that published a 31-page paper of physics that is the dynamical bias in the coin toss. And it's a fascinating read. The show notes, which of course are now that we're publishing, so the links are in the show notes, but their abstract on this 31-page paper reads, we analyze the natural process of flipping a coin, which is caught in the hand. We prove that vigorously flipped coins
flipped.
Oh yeah, and it matters. We have some takeaways here that I'll cover in a second.
Okay.
But vigorously flipped coins are biased to come up the same way they started.
Biased by how much though?
Well, but I mean,
any bias is non-random. So.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
The amount of bias depends on a single parameter: the angle between the normal to the coin and the angular momentum vector.
Well,
that's why I did say I was going to simplify this.
Yeah.
Measurements of this parameter based on high-speed photography are reported. For natural flips, and look at this, you're scrolling through this right now. It's like it's head-spinning physics.
Yeah.
For natural flips, the chance of coming up as started is about 0.51.
Okay.
So not 0.50.
So you're likely, if you flip a 1, to flip another 1 by a small amount.
Correct. Or exactly. Or if you don't randomize the starting orientation, then you're going to be biased on the way it falls.
Right.
So here's a set of really interesting takeaways from that. I mean, like, okay, who hasn't flipped a coin or had an occasion to do that? So here on the Security Now podcast, here's the wisdom from the research. of guys who really studied this. If the coin is tossed and caught, it has about a 51% chance of landing on the same face it was launched. So in other words, if it starts out as heads, there's a 51% chance it will end as heads. But if the coin is spun rather than tossed, it can have
the flick that people do, right?
Yeah. Yes, it can have a much larger than 50% chance of ending with the heavier side down. Not really surprising when you think about it. It turns out that spun coins can exhibit a huge bias.
Yeah.
It says some coins will fall tails up 80% of the time. So if you can trick somebody into, choosing tails, choosing heads and spin the coin, that can be a huge win for you, depending upon the coin.
So if you can get heads, flick it so that it spins, and the more vigorously you flip it, the better.
Well, now spinning is meant like this.
Like that, not flicking it.
Twirling
it. Nobody's going to let you spin a coin that way.
Twirling it on a hard surface.
That's not how you flip a coin.
That's the problem.
I want to pick heads, and I'm going to spin it. No.
Yes, and it turns out 80%.
So this doesn't count, like flicking it like that, because that's
They were talking about. They were definitely talking about spinning it on a hard surface. If the coin is tossed and allowed to clatter to the floor, they say this probably adds randomness.
Yes, of course.
Okay. If the coin is tossed and I got that one twice. If the coin is tossed and allowed to clatter to the floor where it spins, as will sometimes happen, the above spinning bias probably comes into play. So that's not surprising. Now get this one. A coin will land on its edge around 1 in 6,000 throws, creating what they called a fliptistic singularity.
Yes.
So there you go, baby. You've hit the fliptistic singularity.
If you'd asked me, I would have thought it'd be much less likely than 1 in 6,000.
I did too. I've never
seen that happen.
Never seen it happen. But they're saying 1 in 6,000.
6,000.
So, and you can probably prove that at home because, that's not that many.
Get to work. You could tell us next week.
If you do, I want a picture. Be sure you got your webcam or your phone recording it. Otherwise, we're not believing it.
Yeah. I imagine there's some bias introduced by the fact that they're using automated flippers and things.
No. They removed that. The same initial coin flipping conditions produce the same coin flip result. That is, they did actually create their automated coin flipper. They were able to set it up so that every time it flipped it, it got the same result.
Yeah.
Period.
Wow. Because that's super consistent. Yeah.
The same initial coin flipping conditions produce the same coin flip result. So it says there's a certain amount of determinism to the coin flip.
Because it's a mechanical device. Yeah.
Right. Oh, and the more robust coin toss, which is to say the more revolutions, the lower the bias. So if you for whatever reason you have to get a coin toss and say you're the person who's calling it. If someone does sort of a lame toss where it's not really flipping, it's like in the air, but it's not really spinning fast, that's going to tend to be have more bias than if it spins really fast. Right. And I guess that we didn't really learn much.
Just don't gamble with professionals is what I learned.
Finally, many people just tweeted something which I haven't had a chance to dig into because it's just hot off the press. But it's a breakthrough in zero-knowledge proofs. And I'll just quote from this because it's a nice teaser. I will dig into it and figure out what it means and talk about it probably next week. And this is a guy, Amit Shahai. As a graduate student at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, in '96, Amit Shahai was fascinated by the strange notion of a zero-knowledge proof, which we've actually covered on the podcast. And I'll remind our listeners and point people here in a second at where we talked about Alibaba's cave, famously. A type of mathematical protocol for convincing someone that something is true without revealing any details of why it is true. As Shahai mulled over this counterintuitive concept, it led him to consider an even more daring notion. What if it were possible to mask the inner workings not just of a proof, but of a computer program, so that people could use the computer program without being able to figure out how it worked? That is, not being able to see into it and reverse engineer it. And there's actually apparently a breakthrough that makes this possible, which is very cool. So, as an intro to this concept of zero-knowledge interactive proofs, that's the title of podcast number 363, where we tell the tale of Alibaba's cave. So, longtime listeners will remember the podcast about Alibaba's cave. If that sounds new to you, that was on August 1st of 2012. Go check out Security Now number 363. You're going to need it because we will assume that that's knowledge in evidence when we go into how this can be leveraged, apparently, into the design of software, which can be used but cannot be understood.
I didn't understand it the first time, but okay, go ahead. And I was there.
I did want to mention, Leo, I heard you mentioning on MacBreak Weekly, as you said you would, my discovery of the overture of Touch ID. It has been a huge hit in the past week. There's been so many tweets from people, even people creating blogs and web pages and things to retell and re-explain how this operates. And so I did create, I don't know if I had a bit.ly shortcut for that.
You did.
Okay, bit.ly/SGTID.
Yeah.
And that must in fact expand out to somebody's blog posting.
No, it goes to YouTube and jumps right to the part of the show where you walk us through it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So if for people who may have forgotten about it or haven't had a chance to try it, for what it's worth, now we've had a much larger base of experience of people saying, wow, it works.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a really good tip. I was glad I could mention it on MacBreak Weekly. And I don't know if you saw, but it's written up on imore.com. And I suspect more and more people will play with it. It's really good. Yeah. By the way, that is not a garbage truck in your backyard, everybody. You're listening. That is Steve's. It's our regular NSA pickup of his documents.
Our weekly, yes. It turns out that you can scan them, and what they're actually doing there at that large facility in Utah is they are taking pictures of the shreds.
The shreds, and in case they need to reassemble them.
And Watson is reassembling them just to see if there's anything good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It's just metadata. Don't worry about it.
I did want to mention I'm now working on the, as I did say, on Squirrel's UI. And what's interesting is that, and not surprising, is that my work on the user interface is feeding back into the technology because, this thing will not succeed if it's confusing to anyone. And so I'm working on the deconfusing part where we want to have this thing still be feature rich without overwhelming people. So what's happened is almost inevitably, as I've been struggling with how to make its operation clear, I've realized, okay, now wait a minute. We have like too many degrees of freedom built into the back end of the technology. So I've been making some changes which have ended up in some really nice additional functionality, essentially. So there is a new page finished as a result of this. It's not the UI yet, but the Squirrel region of GRC now has 20 pages, and not all of them are finished, but this one is. Number 5 is what I call the key flow. And so it's got a URL, but yeah, if Leo, you click on you found it. There it is. Yeah. So this, and it'll make your eyes cross a little bit when you first see the flow chart. But it's, if you spend some time, it's other people in our news groups, the GRC news group, where we're working on this stuff, have spent some time looking at it and reading through it and said, wow, I actually understand that. So it's the way Squirrel manages passwords and keys, which we've ended up adding some features actually, and at the same time reducing the complexity of the user interface. So we're getting there. As soon as and I'm now working on the UI, the actual, what the user sees in order to make it all go. So if you're interested in this, I commend you to take a look at page number 5 of the Squirrel site, which is the key flow. I think you'll enjoy looking at the chart, thinking about it, and then reading the text below where I explain sort of step by step what each facet of that is about. And as you mentioned, Leo, the source of my income that allows me to spend time on things that I don't charge for, everyone, of course, knows, is SpinRite. We had a really nice testimonial from a Philip Cook, who he said, I started my day with a blue screen of death. Whoops. That's not a good way to start your day. Advising that I had an unmountable boot volume, which, of course, Windows users have seen from time to time, unfortunately. He said, efforts by a Dell tech only led him to the conclusion that we should reformat the tech and I are going to reformat the drive and lose all my data. Nothing would recognize the drive, and all the check disk commands in the book could not even see it or result in anything but the same blue screen on every reboot. A Mac Store utility I ran advised me to return the drive for replacement, but I couldn't. He said, after getting estimates ranging from $400 to $2,700 to recover my data, and by the way, they don't come with a guarantee, and trying numerous other tricks, he says in quotes, recommended by online chats, etc., I was fortunate to come across SpinRite. At first, the glowing testimonials, which obviously he means on my site, and of course I'm reading one such, which he then contributed, but he said, at first the glowing testimonials seemed just too good to be true, and I will admit that I thought they may even have been fake, as he now, again, contributes one that really does sound that way. He said, so I invested the $89, downloaded the file, and fired it up. At first, I thought that it was going nowhere, because after 4 hours, it still said 2% complete, which of course meant it hit a bad spot and SpinRite was just going to work until it fixed it. He says, I figured I would leave it running, and imagine my surprise when I came back, saw the message that it had completed. It booted up, ran check disk, and then started Windows. All I can say is, wow. Thanks for taking the time to create this program. It's bad enough losing data, but I also saved the hours it would have taken to recreate my desktop, links, etc. Needless to say, I'm impressed. Philip Cook. So thank you, Philip, for a very nice affirmation of SpinRite's capabilities.
You know, before we get into the meat of our show today, I wouldn't mind...
Fun stuff.
Fun stuff. I wouldn't mind talking a little bit about Proxpn. We were talking about protecting yourself online. And, of course, the best way to do it is to do it with encryption. A lot of people know about OpenVPN. That's the solution that does, in fact, encrypt all the traffic coming out of your computer. as it heads out onto the internet. Eventually, you get to the OpenVPN server, whether it's yours or a third party's, and then it goes into the public space. But in that process, your ISP's been blocked. Anybody who's sitting on the same internet access point as you has been blocked. You got some privacy. That's what Proxpn does. You don't have to run the VPN server. All you have to do is run Proxpn. They have a free version if you want to try it out. In fact, I invite you to go visit proxpn.com/twit. Yes, I know it's OpenVPN, but it's Proxpn. If you go to the website, proxpn.com/twit. They do also support PPTP. But now, thanks to the Proxpn mobile apps, free for Android and iPhone, you can use VPN, OpenVPN on those platforms with Proxpn. So a couple of things. Of course, you get the privacy, but you also bypass geographic restrictions because Proxpn has servers all over the world. Not only Dallas and Los Angeles, Seattle and New York City, but London and Amsterdam and Singapore too. So when you emerge on the internet, you actually emerge in that city, eliminating any geographic restrictions. Everything up to that point is encrypted. So your internet service provider can't spy on what you're doing or enforce those bogus 6-strike rules. Surf the web the way it was intended, without oversight. Disguise your physical location. Get access to any website or online service, no matter where you live or travel to. Proxpn. Now, normally, Proxpn, I said there's a free version, but you probably want the premium version. Normally, that's $75 a year or $10 a month. We've got a special deal for you that's going to save you quite a bit, 20% off, when you use the offer code SN20. SN20. So here's what you do. Visit proxpn.com/twit. Read all about it. Look at the basic versus the premium. Then when you check out, use the offer code SN20, and you're going to be protected for as little as $5 a month on the yearly plan. Proxpn accepts payment through Visa, PayPal, and now Bitcoin as well. Wow, that's great. Make sure you use our offer code SN20 at proxpn.com/twit. Stephen approved. Leo encouraged. Or something like that. Something like that. proxpn.com/twit. Steve Gibson is here, and we are ready to talk about the subject of the day.
So I love this data because it's first of all, was methodically and very nicely pulled together. And I liked it also because it's sort of a snapshot of where we are at the beginning of 2014, the current internet password policy. So, we know what the problems are. We've talked about it a lot. In non-multi-factor user-generated passwords, they're going to typically have low entropy. They're going to generally be reused. And, they're going to be like, their own favorite secret, birth dates or dogs' names or sometimes, a string of digits, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so forth. So, so the incoming password is already in trouble. Then we have the problem of websites storing them in plain text or in unsalted simple hashes. And of course, we always talk about, the large number of instances where databases of stored passwords get loose. The hackers run them against the hash that was being done and crack all of the easy ones, because again, that coupled the poor storage on the website couples with the poor generation on the user side, and people's passwords get loose. And of course, then famously, since people are generally reusing these weak secrets that they have, their account data gets loose, and it's possible for them to get impersonated on other sites, let alone the one that just suffered the breach. So, this is just a big mess. And yesterday when I was on with Mike, I sort of explained on TNT briefly. I explained that one of the problems is that why do we have these problems? Why are there so many websites with really inadequate security? And I think one of the reasons is that security is invisible. You can't. There's no visibility from the user's view into the security of the site. Yes, sometimes if there's no password policy shown, if it accepts a 2-character password, that would be a concern. I mean, so there are some things that the user can test, but most people don't. And the problem is that we know that security tends to conflict with usability. That is, the more restrictive the policies are, the more people who they're not going to be able to use their favorite password, and then so they're going to grumble about that. So the trade-off is made. Well, we don't want to inconvenience our users, so we're not going to impose strict regulations on what they're able to do. But more than that, it's really not possible to know what's happening behind the scenes, how a website's security actually looks. And if there was some way of making that really visible in a usable fashion, well, then to a much greater degree than I think we see today, websites would take the time to improve the security that they're offering, because then it would become a feature. Then it would become something that they could be held to account for. And so that's another one of the reasons that I really like the work that Dashlane did, is that, to the degree that this gets some press and some publication beyond the scope of our own listeners, who probably already, have much greater and better password habits than the typical internet user, this is a good thing. Dashlane, first of all, I want to make sure we give them credit for this. They are another one of the password manager sort of companies. And, of course, we know LastPass is the one I use only because, it's just of inertia, I guess. It does everything that I want. And I was able to get a full read on the technology and verified the way it functions. People are always tweeting me, what about 1Password or this password or that password or even Dashlane? And I just say, well, it's probably okay. And sometimes I'll take a look at the security and it confirm that it looks okay, but I just haven't done the deep dive. So Dashlane is another of those. They're a little pricey for their registered version. They ask for $30 a year, whereas LastPass asks for $12. And I don't really see anything to differentiate them. They've got mobile platforms and cloud synchronization, cross-device synchronization and so forth. But they are a password manager. And actually, I don't know if I see multi-factor support in their list of things.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love about LastPass. I can use a YubiKey or Google Authenticator.
Yeah, but I did want to give them a tip of the hat because they produced the data, which was really interesting. Now, at the beginning of the day today, I grabbed their raw data and created a massively large PNG file. And that link is, and I'm serving that from my site, is bit.ly/SN441, all lowercase. And that, of course, is the episode of Security Now, SN441, all lowercase. And the problem, of course, just being a huge PNG, and this is of their raw data, is that you lose the labels of the companies, the websites on the left, and the headings of the columns on the top. And so someone said in the dialogue in Twitter this morning, hey, wouldn't it be great to create a big, turn this really needs to be turned into a spreadsheet. And so this was initiated by John M., who is Liquid Retro, is his Twitter handle. He created it, and then a few other people jumped in, and I added some highlighting to the right-hand side of the score columns in order to make it a little more clear how they were paired. Somebody else added coloration. So now we have this very cool Google spreadsheet, which I recommend people take a look at. There may be a problem depending on how many people are trying to get it at once, because as Leo, you explained to me that it's that Google puts a limit on how many people can. Anyway, it is bit.ly/ and again, all lowercase, SN441 sheet, SHEET. And it is fascinating what Dashlane found when they essentially had to, I don't know if they did this manually or they probably wrote a script that they were able to maybe aim at these different sites, because they have reverse engineered the password policies, the online login password policies of the internet's current top 100 retailers. So, and there are some, there's a summary that I'll discuss in a second, but as I was like browsing around in the spreadsheet, there was, I came across like the most curious things. And I talked about some of them at the top of the show, but for example, I could understand, because one of the columns, for example, is minimum password length. Do companies enforce a minimum length? And if so, what is it? So turns out that many companies do support a minimum length of 8. 8 seems to be common. We would argue, those of us who are Security Now podcast involved people, that 8's not enough, that you need, more than 8 in order to get security. But the problem is, of course, that's going to really start hampering people. They're going to be upset that their 8-character password is not enough if someone asks for more than 8. But 8 was regarded as enough. If it wasn't a common 8-character password, like the word password. So what I was curious about looking down the minimum password length column was that there were some Northern Tool and 1-800-Flowers, which is, a major internet website, has a minimum password length of 1. Now, okay, that means your password can be Q, and they'll say, okay, fine. So a minimum password length of 1 is basically checking between, blank and anything. So all it's really doing is seeing, did you leave the password field blank? So I can understand that test. But there's a company called Build that has a minimum password length of 2, which is really curious to me. It's like, so somebody checked to make sure the password field wasn't blank, but if it's 1, then they say, no, you can't have 1 character. You need at least 2. Okay. But get this, Leo. Cafe Press has a minimum length of 3, as does Scholastic Inc. and Urban Outfitter and Nutrisystem. It's like major websites. So you can use a password of 4 characters at Cafe Press, but not 3. Okay. So somebody had to write code to say, no, 3-character password, not good. 4, oh yeah, okay. We like that. 4 is fine. Wow. And a minimum length of then like 1 notch up, minimum password length of 4. I'm sorry, Cafe Press is minimum length of 3. So I misspoke just then. So 3 characters is enough for Cafe Press. But not 2. It's like, just crazy. Karmaloop, VitaCost, FreshDirect, Shutterfly has a minimum length of 4. Victoria's Secret, minimum length of 4. Maybe that's so you can make your password be love. And Shop NBC, minimum length of 4. So there were some surprising numbers in here. And again, I ask myself, who is going to write code to set a minimum length of 2, 3, or 4? I don't get it. And then it was interesting, of the top 100 sites, even like the really, really, really bad ones, and there are some really bad ones at the bottom of this pile. By the way, that spreadsheet is sorted in order of the overall total, the score that each site achieved in the test. So what Dashlane did was they took all these different parameters and they set weights on the different policies that they tested, and then they were able to sum them together. So 100 is a perfect score. A minus 100 is like the worst you can get. And so this list is, this spreadsheet is sorted by final score. So that, like the column on the very far right, you can see it goes from 100 down to minus whatever it is for like the worst one. But every single company masks the password during entry. And I have to say, that's one of the things that I've never understood. And so, for example, in my Squirrel UI, it'll be masked, but right there will be a button saying, show me the password that I'm entering. Because I have never understood, like, the great security value. It's almost as if not showing it to the user somehow conveys some magic where
it's imaginary.
It's like, nothing in the world can see it. Yeah. Everyone should understand that it's just the screen, just the display is been instructed not to show you the shape of the character whose button you just pressed. It exists everywhere else. In your mind and in the computer and in the browser and in the field and in the form and on the wire, everywhere, except just those little pixels are not being lit up in its shape, which, the only possible reason is that you're entering your password with a crowd gathered behind
watching you.
All watching you.
Well, in fact, that's exactly how I enter my passwords, but I'm the only one.
But, Leo, you'll be glad to know.
Yes.
Every single one of these 100, even the crazy sites that do everything else wrong.
One character passwords, but no one can see it.
Yes. They cannot tell when you type Q.
Yeah.
Because, Leo, who would come up with Q? It's only the most obvious one.
Well, you have a chance. 1 in 26.
Up there. No. Look at that. Look at your keyboard.
Q is right, the first one.
That's where your eyes immediately go to Q.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll bet that's actually the one everyone's typing.
Probably.
Okay. I just have to say that's the stupidest thing.
Thank you. I thought it was just me. I've always, and it's particularly annoying on smartphones.
Yes.
Where they do
whose keyboard, you're typing things wrong all the time. Anyway.
You need to see it.
Yes.
It's just crazy.
Yeah. I mean, it ought to have right there, turn off the dots.
Yeah.
I don't want dots. I want to see what I'm typing. Because yes, Apple did the clever idea of showing you the most recent one you've hit. Right. But then you have to look at it every single time to make sure.
You got to watch.
And the point is, it's not hiding it from anybody except you.
Facebook, to their credit, they know this. Obviously, Mark's a geek. Mark Zuckerberg probably thought, this is stupid. I got to do it. But after you enter it wrong once, it then puts it in plain text. It says, "Okay, let me give you a hand." In the mobile devices, anyway.
Okay, yeah.
Let me give you a hand. It's pretty stupid. Thank you for saying that, because it's been driving me crazy.
Something very worthwhile is when sites offer you advice, because this is a teaching opportunity. My mom needs help. And so, no one's really told her when she started logging into, as she calls it, AWOL. She didn't, it's like, oh, I have to create an account. Oh, I know. I'll use, my children's names, or who knows what mom uses. I don't know. But, I'm sure it's not a high quality password. And if right then there'd been a few lines to explain to her, like some of the things she should consider, then she'd have not made a mistake. But that was missing. So to a greater degree than, actually to a surprising degree, this is one of the things that is ranked, and you can see it on the spreadsheet. In that column, there's a lot of Y's under is password advice being offered right there. Now, one of the things that's annoying is when they have a lot of criteria and they don't tell you what those are right up front. That's another gripe of mine, is where, you're wanting to create a high quality password, but you don't know, are they going to allow me to use special characters? Are they, can I put digits in this or not? Because, it's not until it fails that it then says, oh, sorry, you can't, you have to use only this or that. Well, why not tell me right there up front? So sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Another interesting aspect that they checked was whether mixed case was required. Clearly a good thing, because that increases the size of the alphabet and makes brute forcing the password more difficult. Not a perfect solution, but we see over and over and over, many people use all lowercase because it's easier for them to type. They don't have to hit the shift key. And again, especially in a mobile platform where shift is, something you have to more explicitly and deliberately do. Now, the on-screen password strength meter is one of the best things you can do, because there is a teachable moment right there. Also, if not just showing them a meter, but telling them why they're not doing so well, like, or like have a series of check boxes, sort of like what I did over on the password haystacks page, where as they were typing things, when they like added uppercase, then blink I light up a light saying, you got some uppercase. When they hit a digit, whoop, another light lights up. Oh, good, you got a digit there, and so forth. Now, to do that interactively, you need scripting on. There's no way you're going to do this otherwise. The only, the way to do it without scripting would require them to submit a bad password and then come back to them and explain why this password wasn't up to snuff. So not nearly as good as scripting, but we're seeing more and more instances where you really can't operate without scripting, and you could make your password entry page just tell them, in order to handle password entry, you need to turn scripting on just for this page, please, and then give them a little built-in tutorial. So the notion of an interactive password strength meter, that's really great. Yet today, only 7 of the top 100 retail sites do it. So, we see it. I know that LastPass does it, although they weren't on this list. But Apple actually is the #1 site in the survey, and we'll talk about some of the reasons why in a second. But that's clearly a useful thing to do. Now, the final 2 on the, there are some other criteria worth looking at, but do they block login after 4 missed attempts? We see instance after instance where you can just guess forever. And we know why. First of all, maybe they're not doing it because they don't care. Or maybe they're not doing it because they don't want the support burden of somebody who now cannot log in after 4 failed attempts. But Apple blocks you after 4 misses.
Good. This prevents brute forcing it.
Yes, Newegg blocks you. Nordstrom blocks you. Hay Needle, whoever they are. Foot Locker, Costco, Staples, Shop NBC. Now, notice this Shop NBC blocks you after 4 tries, but also allows a 4-character password. So I guess
that's okay, though, right? Because the chances, well, I guess if it's QWER, that's the first one I'd guess. But if you had 4 random characters.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
If you have 4 random characters, it would take you a few times to guess it. So in some ways, that makes up for weak policies and other.
Blocking after 4 is I get it that it's going to be a problem. I mean, you have to have online tech support. I mean, it's going to be a problem, but as you said, Leo, I can see the necessity for a site like Apple, which is a high value.
You don't want robots attacking the login.
Yeah. Now, again, because it's online, you're going to have a delay loop, and in fact, that's if you could afford it. And server architectures don't make this easy, but to be able to hold up the response to mistaken passwords. For example, Unix has famously done this, where as you keep making a mistake, it waits longer and longer and longer to come back. That's beautiful, but that works because you're on the computer. The computer you're trying to log into is right there in front of you, typically, or remote login and so forth. But a web server typically has an architectural problem of like holding up a response for a long time. It could be designed so that it's not a problem to do that, but that would be the nice thing. So these guys, Dashlane, tests blocking after 4 and blocking after 10. Those two. Microsoft blocks after 10, but not after 4. Target, same thing, 10. CDW, Amway, Musician's Friend, WW Grainger, Walgreens, CVS, and others. So there are major sites that do put a limit. But for example, Amazon doesn't. You can sit there and guess someone's login password till the cows come home. Just keep on going. So overall summary of the stats from this analysis: 73%, so nearly 3/4 of the current top 100 retail online websites accept passwords having 6 or fewer characters. So many are just ridiculously like not checking your length, or I can't understand. 4 is enough. Like, okay. 62% do not require a mixture of letters and numbers. So nearly 2/3 don't care if it's all alpha. They won't reject it saying, "Oh, sorry, please add some numbers to your password." But frankly, the fact that a third do, I guess I'm surprised it's that many, and I'm glad that it's that many.
That seems to be one of the most commonly adopted security measures, is you got to have a number. Kind of drives me crazy because I have a long alphanumeric that I use. And
I've had
alphabetic.
Right. I've run across that being annoying too.
I should point out, these are retail sites. These are retailers, not so. They have a strong economic interest in you.
Big traffic.
Yes, understand, but they have a strong economic interest in you creating an account. So they have to balance appropriate security with inconveniencing the customer too much.
Yeah. I forgot to mention, I had it in my notes, but with Squirrel, there's none of this. This all goes away.
Yeah.
Of course, passwords go away. I mean, and breaches go away.
Right.
Your Squirrel gives the website nothing that it has to protect. Its database can get stolen. It doesn't matter.
Right.
There's no way to impersonate someone, even if they get the database for a given site. So, this fixes all of this. And so, fingers crossed that this will end up happening. Okay. Now, I was surprised about this number too. 55% accept except 10 of the most commonly used weak passwords. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1111111, or the word password, and so forth. So they test, and the spreadsheet shows the 10 most commonly used passwords. 55% accept 10 of those, which is to say they're not checking. But I was impressed that that means 45% are actually checking to see, hopefully before they hash it, whether it's one of these really dumb passwords, and just say, no, sorry, come on. You try harder. You could do better than that. So I'm somewhat encouraged by that. Half the sites, 51%, make no attempt to block entry after 10 incorrect password entries. And those 51% include Amazon, Dell, Best Buy, Macy's, and Williams-Sonoma. No attempt. You can guess forever. So that's a little disturbing because, as you said, Leo, 10 is a lot. 10, it's like, okay, sorry, call us, click here, do something.
10 seems to be enough, and it's a low enough, a high enough number that it should give you plenty of opportunities. Because I understand people go, oh, and I do this a lot. Oh, which password did I use, or that kind of thing.
Exactly. That's the failure model. Is you can't remember which one of your collection of common passwords that you use there.
Right.
Yeah. 61% don't provide any advice on how to create a strong password during sign-up. Although, again, I'm encouraged that means 40 or 39% do provide advice, because that's something clearly useful.
Right.
And 93% do not, because remember, we said that only 7% did. That's 7 out of those 100 do provide on-screen strength assessment, which is really, that's just a win. That is like the number one way to get people, just to sort of passively encourage them to create a good password. Show them that they're in the red, and, give them some clues about what they ought to add to the password they're building in order to get their score higher and generate a stronger result. I like that. So overall, of the 100 that were checked, only 10% scored above the threshold for good password policies.
Wow.
That was, in this standard of measure, 45 points or more in the roundup. And you could get 100 as far as a positive 100 or as poor as a negative 100, and only 10%, 10 out of that 100 pushed it over a score of 45. And then one of the other things they checked is, I forgot my password. What is it? 8 sites, including Toys R Us, J. Crew, 1-800-Flowers, which actually no longer surprises me because they accept one-character passwords. Send passwords in plain text via email.
Really? That many?
Right?
Wow.
Yeah. 8 out of those top 100s just say, here's your password. And I get tweets,
which means they have it in the clear as well, right? They have it.
Yes, exactly. Actually, someone just tweeted me the other day, Yahoo said, in response to them having to change their password, your new password is too similar to your previous password.
I've seen that in places,
Well, and what does that tell you?
They know your password.
Exactly.
Because a hash wouldn't reveal how close it was.
Exactly. Yeah. A hash would look completely different if you just change one character. So that means Yahoo is also storing it in the clear.
Yeah, wow.
Which actually is no surprise, knowing how great Yahoo security is.
Yeah.
Apple received the highest rating and was the only retailer of those 100 to get a perfect score.
Wow.
Apple was perfect. Newegg, Microsoft, and Chegg. What is Chegg? Chegg? Anyway, whoever they are, they're big somewhere. They all tied for second place, and Target rounded out at third place. Their online password handling is pretty good, even if their in-store point-of-sale terminals have had some problems.
A textbook store for students.
Yeah. Also, MLB.com, Karma Loop, Karma Loop, and Dick's Sporting Goods received the 3 lowest scores. And I got a kick out of noticing, of course, MLB, I did the math here in my head. I figured that had to be Major League Baseball.
Yep.
And they allow the password baseball.
But that's number
site.
1 on their site.
How many people do you think might be protecting themselves, unquote, with the password baseball on MLB.com?
Wow.
Amazon, Walmart, Victoria's Secret, Toys R Us were also among the lowest ranked sites, receiving scores of -35 or below. So again, Amazon, Walmart, Victoria's Secret, Toys R Us. Very, very poor policies.
What this doesn't reflect, though, I mean, look, Target was what, number 3, is other security policies. For instance, you know, that people could hack in. And you know, Apple, number 1, quite notoriously gave up Matt Honen's account information to social engineering. They've changed that so it doesn't work anymore. That technique, anyway, doesn't work anymore. But, you know, what's one of the things we've learned from the Matt Honen case and others is that having great passwords and great password security is not necessarily all that's required to securing your account.
Right. So these guys sum up their overview by distilling all of this to 4 simple password management strategies or advice to websites. Require that passwords contain at least 8 characters and a combination of upper and lowercase numbers and symbols. Block account access after 4 failed login attempts. I think that's a little short.
That's low, yeah.
Yeah, I do. I think that's going to really cause some
10's
problems.
plenty.
Yeah, I think
10,
so.
10 is enough to stop brute force.
I think so. Provide users with on-screen advice on how to choose a strong password during sign-up. I love the on-screen advice.
Yeah.
And provide users with an on-screen assessment of password strength while they're choosing a password. That is, basically look at the password, and you know, the dictionary of most commonly used passwords is so short, which is really sad, but that you could easily have that as part of your JavaScript. So you know, I'm immediately thinking of, you know, you don't want to be, you know, making a round trip to check the password entered so far against a database, and the point is you don't have to.
Just do it at the end.
The list of really bad passwords will easily fit in the JavaScript, which is also showing you, you know, like, do you have characters, upper and lowercase, and so forth. Add a simple dictionary to say, okay, yes, but this is something you can't use. And actually, most of those common passwords would fail the upper lowercase numbers and symbols test because they don't have any of that. They're all numbers, or they're all lowercase alpha. So anyway, that's it. I encourage listeners who are interested to go check out, just scroll around this web sheet or this the online web page spreadsheet at Google. It's really interesting to see what companies are doing. And with any luck, we will see evolution over time. Clearly the best companies weren't always this good. They decided to take this seriously and you know, tighten down the screws, batten down the hatches, you know, make their online login tighter. Because again, this isn't automatic that these things happen. You do need to write some code and make it so.
And here's one more password we want to add to the most common list. It would be welcome here in Leet speak. You probably shouldn't use that one. This is a video. I'm sure you saw this story.
Oh my God, yes.
Of the super secret Super Bowl security center that ran on CBS. And of course, there's a big screen, a lot of big screens. By the way, a lot of big screens running. It looks like Windows XP, I got to tell you. Yeah. When I look at that menu bar, that's a very XP-like menu bar right there. They also neglected to pull down, or I don't know, they had a big screen that said Wi-Fi access, login, Marco, password, welcome here in Leet speak.
Yeah, MARKO is the SSID for the Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
And then that's the shared.
Oh, that's the SSID, not the, of course, not the login, right?
Yep.
It was apparently a internal Wi-Fi access spot, but just a little tip. Oh, it's so funny. Hey, thank you, Steve Gibson. As always, a very interesting show. You get the show notes Steve now posts on his website, grc.com, with the rest of the Security Now stuff, including 16 kilobit versions of the audio for the bandwidth impaired, people who still want to listen but don't want to download a giant file. Transcripts, too, written by Elaine Ferris. Very nicely done there. You'll get full versions of the show on our website, twit.tv/SN, in higher quality video and audio. You can also find it wherever podcasts are aggregated. Netcasts, I guess we call them, including iTunes and Stitcher and all those places. If you visit grc.com, don't forget to check out all the great stuff, the freebies, Shields Up, and the password, perfect paper passwords, and all of that. And if you're so inclined, wouldn't be a bad thing to tip Steve by purchasing a copy of SpinRite, the world's best hard drive maintenance recovery utility.
Even if you don't think you need it, it does actually prevent hard drives from failing, as many users have found. I get reports of I've never had a failure. I run SpinRite every couple months, and
it's a good idea.
Keeps my drives from failing. It actually does work.
It's like an oil change for your hard drive.
Exactly.
Our show we do now at a new time, and I want to remind you of that. We do it Tuesdays, 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. That is 2100 UTC at twit.tv, right after Mac Break Weekly. If you tune in and Mac Break Weekly is still going on, it'll be on soon. We also, as I said, make it available after the fact. Thank you, Steve Gibson, and everybody else who's joined us here today. See you next week on Security Now.
Thanks, Leo.